Should I turn on my actual recorder?
Please please turn on the audio. Okay,
I do
three,
my best.
three, two, one, go.
Hello, hello, hello. This is Corey Thompson from Dice Tower Dish and Above Board TV.
And this is the only professional on this show, Stephen Bonacore, the Podfather of gaming.
What?
You are listening to Board Games Insider, episode 333, and we are recording on August 29th, 2024. Board Games Insider is proud to be powered by Board Game Geek. So I see you're in your very luxurious recording studio. Not.
Hey, I have a very professional sound baffle here. It's certainly not moving blankets on PVC frame.
Somebody actually told me, God, Corey's got all that money and he has the most ugly looking sound baffle in his house there, but it doesn't matter.
It's actually only up because my
Yeah,
room is an absolute wreck.
very,
It
very
has
good.
been crazy here. So I've had a couple things going on. I was recently on a cruise, a small little gaming cruise with friends. And when I got back, immediately there was a group from Cardboard Alchemy at the house that were filming segments about Critter Kitchen, about
About what?
Andromeda's Edge, Critter
Oh,
Kitchen, coming game from Cardboard Alchemy, and Andromeda's
oh,
Edge from Luke Laurie,
cool.
Nestlings. And it was really cool to watch. There were all these influencers. We had Matt Lees here. We had Danielle
Nice.
Standring. We had Bonzinator with her team, Tim Chu. Um, Jason, we had a large group of people, and they were moving tables around and filming outside and making little sets in the house. It was really pretty cool. My birthday came and went around then, and they gave me nice little birthday gifts. So I got signed Sundaratang print, and everybody from the group did it. It was really
That's
fun.
that is cool,
And
man.
then as soon as that group ended, Lucky Duck came in. They're associated, they have a good relationship back and forth. So Lucky Duck was playtesting and visiting and enjoying the area. The whole group went out to San Francisco and watched Grant uh, do his comedy show in San Francisco. Made a vacation of it. So we play tested some games with Lucky Duck, deciding whether they're going to be used or not at Lucky Duck. And this morning, the Lucky Duck group actually was packing up and getting ready to go.
And
So it's
they're
been
going
busy.
back to was it Vince that was there, or the president?
No, no, no. Scott was here.
Oh, Scott Morris was there. Okay.
Yeah, he's
Oh,
actually
gotcha.
still here and kind
Okay.
of on his way, getting ready to head home. And Devin is here, Devin Norris,
Right.
and Chris and Sean. So
So
it's been
the
a
US
really
guys.
nice, the US guys.
Good, good,
So
good.
it's been really fun. I enjoy these guys. We had nice meals, nice games, a good relaxing time. It was a blast.
Very, very cool.
Um,
So over here at the Podfather of Gaming, we Paula and I and our good friends the Phelpses, who Corey, and the
yeah.
Chapmans, who very well. We were all up in St. Augustine last week, just hanging out, gaming, enjoying the city. It's such a great city, St. Augustine, Florida. We rented a house on the beach and just chilled out. So it was great. And I got in a lot of great gaming. Played a couple of games of Dark Tower, which I hadn't
Oh,
touched.
fantastic.
Yeah, I hadn't touched it since it actually was in production. I played the a production early production game of it with Justin, who runs the company, Restoration Games. So that was so much fun to play the actual thing with the Phelpses. We played Sears Catalog, which is that
Oh,
funny,
nice.
yeah, funny take on Sears and Sears from Bezier Games. Xylotar, also from Bezier Games, more trick taking, and the Gang, which is becoming like a little bit of a passion for me right
We
now.
played the Gang here as well.
Yeah, really enjoy that so much. If you're a fan of poker in any way, and even if you're not, you can still play it. But it just turns the entire game on its head. Cooperative Texas Hold'em poker, wild ride there. Love it. And now I'm at the Dice Tower Retreat in Orlando, Florida, with the same group I just mentioned, plus of course another 200 people. And it just started yesterday, so not a lot to report other than I've already played the expansion for Thunder Road Vendetta, Carnival of Chaos.
Ooh.
So this is unreleased. But Justin, again, he's here. Justin Jacobson's here from Restoration Games, and he has a table dedicated to showing it off. So I immediately jumped on that table as soon as I almost walked in the door, and I played it yesterday. It continues in the great way that game plays with chaos, chaos, chaos. And now you're literally fighting in Thunderdome. I don't want to impinge upon that IP there, infringe upon it. But you drive to the center, and then you're fighting and shooting at each other. It's pretty crazy. After this, we're home for a short period of time, and BGG at Sea is going to happen, and that's a cruise to Canada and New England. Can't wait for that. Love to see more gamers there. Followed by the World Series of Board Gaming at the end of September. So very excited about that, of course. Quick shout out to my friends over at Pine Box Entertainment. Just a bunch of nice guys, small company. I like to give them a shout out. They've just released their expansion to Seventh Sea, the City of Five Sails Tooth and Claw expansion. So I wanted to give them a shout out on that. I had talked about it when they had first released the City of Five Sails. So check it out if you're already a fan of that game, or if you're not, check out Pine Box Entertainment's Seventh Sea, City of Five Sails, and the new expansion. And of course, Play to Z is on Kickstarter right now. So if you have not looked at what the company is doing with 23 Knives, an extremely thematic social manipulation game where you might be on Caesar's side or against Caesar, but you might be manipulated to changing sides. You might want to change sides as things go, and the tides of Caesar's fate go one direction or another. So go check that out right now on Kickstarter. You're only going to have about 2 or 3 days once you hear this to get in on that. 23 Knives on Kickstarter by Play to Z right now. In the meantime, the event deck. So Corey, my voice is very raspy.
Yeah, mine too. I've been talking like crazy, so I keep getting a little.
It's funny. We're both a little raspy, but so we have a very slow news week this week. We only have one.
And it's kind of the standard after Gen Con. Gen Con is sort of a buildup of all the releases and news, and people tend to shuffle things around and it goes crazy. So after Gen Con, it tends to be quiet.
It does, and it stays quiet until like late in the year when all of a sudden people start announcing the stuff for next year. So what do we have here? We have a humongous Kickstarter that is in the process right now. It's for Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere RPG. And as of 2 days ago, it was at $11.9 million. Corey,
for an RPG, that's just incredible. It's amazing. 11 million for an RPG.
It's wild. Now, Brandon Sanderson is the biggest author in the world, really, right now. Very prolific and really, really good at what he does. And all of his all of his different stories are in his universe called Cosmere. And this is based on that. It's amazing. Somebody read a little bit of this. Corey, maybe you can find out what it's currently at as of
12.9.
Another $1 million in 2 days that he got. So
yeah, 45,000 backers.
Unbelievable. So Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere RPG by Brotherwise Games, and that's actually important. We'll talk about that in a second. Is now approaching $13 million for their crowdfunding campaign on Kickstarter. This RPG crowdfunding project follows up the announcement of Brotherwise's Mistborn, the deck building game for retail, another Brandon Sanderson licensed game, which happened in July 2024. Cosmere RPG dives headlong into the entire universe of Brandon Sanderson's best-selling novels, offering players a living RPG system to use as they assume the roles of heroes across the different worlds. So, by the way, this is on ICV2. The fact that Brotherwise, very small company, was able to get this is just propelling them into a new stratosphere of
Yeah,
game making and publishing. And they're not
I'm
a
real.
good.
Oh, I was going to say, I'm really curious what's going to happen when the actual deck building game hits, because not only is it Brandon Sanderson and the hype is really high, but it's being designed by John D. Clare,
Oh,
who's, a
nice.
really up there designer. His games tend to command a lot of critical acclaim, a lot of public acclaim. He just makes great stuff. So I'm really excited about the deck building game.
Yeah, no, and yeah, John is a great guy and a great designer. He really gets a lot of press when things happen. So I'm excited to hear what's going to happen there. And big shout out not only of course to John but to Brotherwise for scoring
Oh yeah.
such a major relationship like this. I don't know how they did it, but I might want to talk to them and see how I could do it with other important people. It's just a really great thing for a small company like that to be able to really hit it big with something like this.
Yeah, the RPG is planning to deliver in 2026.
And which makes sense. It's gonna require some bit of fine tuning to make sure it's gonna be good, make sure it's all fleshed out. And they're not an RPG company, so I hope they've got a bunch of people on board. I don't know about that portion of this to make sure that this really ends up to be as good a game as it is, of course, the IP. All right, Corey, that's it for the news. Let's get to
Yep.
strategy and tactics. All right, so we're going to take a lot of questions this week, and a lot of people talk about, hey, do a questions episode. Well, basically, we're going to be doing a lot of questions this episode because the news was slow. So Ron Graves from Canada, he's at Buckaroo. He asking this just after Gen Con wraps, and that would have been Gen Con 23.
That's really funny.
Yeah, heard from several content creators about their experiences at Gen Con. Comments were there was massive crowds, massive lineups, especially for popular games, people 4 or 5 deep around publisher booths, making it very difficult to get a chance to play. Terrible humans, unlikely from the target audience for board game convention, buying up Lorcana and immediately reselling, and a lot of other negative comments. So I asked myself, why would I ever consider spending a couple of grand to go to the madness that is Gen Con rather than attending a couple of small regional cons in a year? Let's say it is your job to sell me on the positives over the negatives and help me decide to spend the money to attend Gen Con. My perception is that overall that it's not worth the aggravation of fighting the masses of humanity, chasing the precious, bright and shiny new object. And maybe, just maybe, if I'm lucky, share tea and a cookie with Ignacy. Oh, that's funny. No, so Ron, I don't know that, I don't know that it is our job to sell you one way or another. I'll say that if I wasn't an industry person,
Yeah.
and you gave
If
me
it were your job to sell Gen Con, well, how would you sell it?
well, no, but I'm going to sell it this way. I go to Gen Con, and I would go to Gen Con over other things, and I do because I'm an industry person and I have so many industry friends, and I want to extend that and be part of that. But if I wasn't, I'd probably spend this. I could spend the same amount of money and go to things where I can gain even more and maybe even have a better time just with groups of people. So if I had to sell Gen Con, I would say stay away from the crowds, go into places when when they're not as crowded. Don't worry about the bright, shiny stuff. They'll be available later. You can look at it. You might maybe see it. Maybe you can't even buy it because it's sold out, but you can demo it and then make your own decision then if you want to buy it later on. That's my sales pitch.
Well,
But Ron,
I'm gonna
I
give,
think Ron's
yeah,
attitude is right. Go to the small regional ones if
yeah.
crowds are not his thing.
But the spirit of the question is, if you were going to sell Gen Con, how would you sell it?
Okay.
And it's difficult because I know, especially in industry, and I've worked there as business and I've gone there for fun, and it's a very different experience. It's a really tough one. Some things about Gen Con. One, it is the new and the shiny. You go to Gen Con because there's going to be a new release or even a release you've never heard of. There's going to be access to games from different countries and different areas that you've never heard of before. You're going to buy something you normally can't get. Two, it's the event space. This is really what makes Gen Con a unique experience for the attendees. Gen Con has over 20,000 events, and these are things from small D&D games to panel talks to discussions with designers, to really strange things that people love. They have a puppet space. Gen Con
Yes.
has a puppet program where, and this is true, the puppet program is the second largest puppet convention in the US, is the puppet program at Gen Con. And it features Sesame Street puppeteers, professionals in the industry. There's a crafting program. You could go in a room where they'll supply you with materials and sewing machines and anything you need for crafting and cosplay and all this neat stuff. There's LARPing programs. All of our wonderful, weird little corners of the nerdverse are represented somewhere in Gen Con. So that is a major reason a lot of people go. And of course, playing games with friends, getting together with friends, doing nerdy things with friends. So
Yep.
that's how I would sell it.
That's how that's a good sales point. Um, it is a spectacle, and I would actually even add to that, you should absolutely go at least once and make the best of it so you can see it.
Yeah,
Now, similarly with Essen, because it's a very, very different experience there as well. Um,
Essen is the shopping mall to end all shopping malls.
for gamers. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right. The next question made me very angry. It really did. I'm very sad mostly when I read this question. It's from Lewis Godbout. He's at Crad007. And he said, just missed the contest for the questions. It's too bad since I had 3 exceptional questions. I'll keep them in a file. My question is when you'll start a new contest for questions. And I said, Lewis, I mean, really, if the only reason you show up here is to get free stuff from us, then don't. Then just don't. And it's not cool. We spend a lot of time trying to make this podcast good for you. And you help us by putting questions here so that we then enjoy it with everybody. If you're here just for the once every couple of years where we're going to give away free stuff for questions, don't listen. So really, I was very sad when I read this. Post questions, everybody. Don't worry, we'll do another contest at some point, but post questions so we have great questions for you. All right, enough preaching. I can't pronounce
I think Joao.
Joie Hogan.
I yeah.
Joie. I'm not good at the little
And
tildes
for
on things.
Portuguese, and I apologize, my Portuguese is really terrible.
Not good. So Joao Hogan from Portugal at Guildois, he asks, how do you explain the success of some games in some countries and not in others? This question came up as Ignacy is constantly saying that Neuroshima Hex is very popular in Poland, but I don't think it is very popular in other regions. As a lover of the game system, both Neuroshima Hex and Monolith Arena, when I opened my board game store in Lisbon, Portugal, I stocked up on these games. However, I've had a very hard time selling them. Do you have any reasons for this type of phenomenon, or am I just bad at selling them? Well, I'm sure you're not.
Trust me, if we knew the
Yeah,
reasons.
we knew the reasons why certain games sold, we would be much better in our businesses.
Now, it is kind of crazy and random, and specifically with the Neuroshima Hex thing, uh, I did an interview with Ignacy a little while ago that's now being posted on Dice Tower Dish, and we talked about this. Nurishima Hex not only hit Poland just at the right time, but there were no other board games in Poland. Poland was in a very unique situation post-communism
Yep.
that there were no board games, and the population was desperate for them. Role playing games were a hint in the air in the 90s. People knew they were around, but nobody had them. And when the role playing games hit and when the board games hit, the population ate it up. And Nurishima Hex was one of this original foundation. It has the same love that, say, Catan has in the US. There were no hobby board games really before Catan.
Yeah.
And when Catan hit, it became just a foundational, this is board games. And I
Right.
think that Nurishima holds that in Poland.
Yeah. 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 We're just in a riches, of choices right now. So it's really hard, what's his name? Joie opened this new store trying to sell this one game that he loves, but there's so many choices out there that people are like, well, no, well, I've heard of that one. I want this one here now, that kind of thing. So it's just really hard to transition people into a mindset if they're going to want to just keep moving along at a different pace. So you're not doing anything wrong, I don't think, but it's
No,
just
no,
difficult.
no. It's even what we consider like the very experts in board gaming never predict. So one of the big ones was when Wingspan hit, nobody knew how hot it was going to be. And actually
Yeah,
it was underprinted. We Stonemeyer had trouble getting enough copies out there. The general consensus was that it wasn't going to be as popular as it was. And now one of the most popular board games out there.
absolutely is. Kurt Van Hoyveld, who's Vitruvian Gamer, big friend of the channel, he says
Yep.
this year's big Portal release is somewhat smaller footprinted, the somewhat smaller footprinted Imperial Miners, right? That was one of their big releases last year. Fantastic game. Does a smaller but not less interesting or fun game like this result in a more relaxed release, lower cost, bigger target group, or not? Harder to create buzz, lots of competition. It's an interesting question. Maybe if Ignacy was here, we would have been able to ask him a little bit about it. But in general, I think that every release kind of stands on its own for what it is. I don't when you do smaller games, they are certainly going to be lower cost. You generally have a bigger target market because more people can
Yeah.
afford a $20 game than can
More
afford
people are
a
going to be
100.
carrying it around than,
Right.
the big giant box hundred and something dollar game.
So is it more relaxed to do smaller releases? In a way, that word is a good word because you don't need as much everything, money. You don't need quite as much marketing to try to push that big game, to small game as you would a big game. So that is probably, in a way, truer than I would have thought when I started reading this question.
There's a little bit less on the line on the industry side as well. So,
Yeah, there's less on the line for the company, right?
yeah.
If things don't go well, that this will work out for you.
So I've often talked to publishers where they're like, this big game, we have worked so hard on this. This is going to make or break us. I really hope this does well. And we made this little thing too. See, what do you think of this?
Yeah, that's true. That is a lot. That is very true. The way that we'll talk about it on occasion with the big release, the big game. Okay, we have Kurt. He next is asking us. No, I'm sorry. We have Eric Langebach. Langebach. He is from Sweden. He's also a big friend of the channel. The current question. Okay, this is from way back
This is
playtesting.
a good one. I like this question.
One of our playtesting questions from way back is about review bombing, castle
Yep.
assault. or manipulating votes in one way or another. How
Yep.
much does hitting the number one spot on BGG impact sales? Are the steps between making it among the top 100 to the top 10 to first place enough of an impact that you can see it? Now, assume he means number one game of all time, right? That's what he's trying to
Yeah,
say.
on BGG. I think that's a significant impact being in that top 10 on BGG, and a lot of people aim for it, advertise it, and use it. Um, Being on the hotness is more of a moment to moment thing that I think impacts sales a little more. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, if you're in the top 10, you've got a
Your evergreen status.
huge evergreen. You have a monumental hit that you'll be selling forever. Because every new get right, because what happens is new gamers come in and they'll be like, oh, this gaming stuff is great. And they'll hear about Board Game Geek, or they'll just search and like, wow, oh, these are the top 10 rated games of all time on this 100,000 list of games. I want those games, or I want to check out those games. And anytime you go and look at a game, you have that much chance of actually
But
buying
for
that
real
game.
impact, it's really a question of, is it the tail wagging the dog? So a lot of times those top 10 games on BGG are there because they're already super popular evergreen sellers. So making it into the top 10 is more of a reflection of how well it sold rather than being in the top 10 impact sales.
Okay, sure. But if you end up in the top 10, you're guaranteed to be selling forever and hard forever. If you look at something that's, I don't know, I was going to pick it around 100, a random game around 100, I'm sure it's still selling a bit. And it's sure it might still be considered an evergreen, but it is not selling as much as, Gloomhaven,
But again, you're using the top 10, the top 100 as a metric of how well it is selling. You're not talking about if it ends up in there, does that then impact sales?
I'm saying that it does impact sales if it ends up in there. It's already sold great because so many people bought it and are rating it and got
Yeah,
it there. But this industry is an industry about hype, right? So
it is.
that's a hype machine. If the game ends up there, you've just increased the hype on your game forever. Is what I'm trying to say. I mean, there are certain games that get there and then slowly sink away, but most games they get there and they stay there for a while and
Yeah.
then very, very, very slowly,
Well,
very
that's
gradually.
why I say that the hotness is a more of an impact on day-to-day sales, on fluctuations in sales. If you're at the top of the BGG hotness, you are going to sell more because of that metric.
All right. Justin Henry from Canada, he's at Gulf of Brass. What are your opinions about doubled titles in the BGG top 100? I look I
Yeah.
look to the top 100 for examples of games that everyone will agree are exceptional. Seeing
Through
through
the
the
Ages
ages
or
or
Twilight
Twilight Imperium
Imperium.
there twice makes the list seem like there are only slightly less than 75 games worth anybody's attention, my opinion. On top of that, there are games that are the spiritual successor to others in the list, and I feel like their inclusion also waters down the usefulness of the list. Gaia Project is one example. Is there anything wrong with this? Should the list be updated? And if so,
Yeah.
how?
It's a so I have opinions. It's really difficult to maintain a list like this. And a lot of times it's very obvious that there's a new version of a game. It's the same game. So it occupies the same listing on BGG. But sometimes the game is pretty significantly different. So Through the Ages, there were two editions of Through the Ages. They were significantly different, and they both were incredibly popular. So they both of those listings made it into the top 100. Um, as far as spiritual successors, that I have no doubt on. Gaia Project and Terra Mystica are very different games, and they both are rated independently. Ignacy would have things to say about it, but it's like Robinson Crusoe and the Mars game. They were essentially the same engine, the same game. One did very, very well, and one didn't. Both Portal games, both the same designer, both the same mechanisms, worth independent listings. It just so happens with Gaia Project that Gaia and Terra Mystica both rated very, very highly. So I do have some mixed feelings about the Through the Ages, the different versions of games. Uh, but as far as spiritual successors, they absolutely deserve to have independent listings and
Yeah.
independent ratings, and
Yeah.
they both can do great.
Yeah, I very much agree with that. I mean, if you're taking the game and retheming it, but changing it, of course, because on the Ignacy's Mars game, which I just can't think of it, and Robinson Crusoe are certainly same similar engines, but they're different games.
Yeah,
Gaia and Terra Mystica are different games,
yeah,
so absolutely deserve. I've always taken issue with additions. I think the additions should be listed in the same
yeah. Like
listing.
Twilight
And
Imperium 3 versus Twilight Imperium 4.
1, 2, 3, 4. I think that they always should have been the same, because you lose all the history. Sort of, you don't know. You just don't understand where the game came from and stuff. And I think it could have been.
Yeah.
You could have done it differently in the way they listed the game, such that you keep those things together.
Well, and the people who play Twilight Imperium a lot are going to argue very strongly that they are very different games. And yeah, there's a lot of rule differences there.
So very interesting thought process. In the end, don't take like top anything ratings and stuff being so serious that that these things are like the grail
Yeah.
of grail.
And,
Because a game is number one does not mean it's your favorite game, and that's okay, right? And it's
sure,
just
sure, sure.
that's people take
But we
these
live
things.
for ratings. Human beings love
Yeah,
ratings.
we
We
do.
love to minimalize and taxonomize and say this category is this and this rating is this and this one's better than that. Our brain does that whether we want to or not.
True
Short
that.
answer though, I don't think the list should be changed. I think it's fine.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
has little things I argue about, but I see other people's points on it. I think
Sure.
it's fine.
In the end, right at this point, we don't change it. We manipulate our brains to work within the structure they have there. BGG is such an important resource to everybody, and it works. Alexander Savinkov, he's at VPumpkin. He says, Corey, one of your comments struck a chord with me. You've mentioned how negative BGG ratings not only influence a game's standing in the hobby, but the well-being of their respective designers as well. So here's a question. How should I rate my games? He's asking you. This could be a very important thing, Corey. I don't like the official BGG system, again, as it gives out mixed signals. On the one hand, it asks how often I want to play the game. On the other hand, it asks whether I think the game is good or bad, which doesn't exactly correlate. There may be a game that I'll never want to play again,
Interesting.
but it may be designed exceptionally well for its target audience. So should I give this game a 2? Won't play ever again, or a 9 for excellent, or something in between? I mean, I have an opinion on this, but go ahead. He asked you
Yeah,
first.
I would ignore the words. I would take a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is like what I consider the best game, and 1 is what I would consider the worst game, and just rate it what I feel is right. And I understand there's a lot of pressure and a lot of responsibility, especially if you think, wow, if I rate this garbage, am I insulting someone? Am I hurting someone's livelihood? But if you're going to rate games, rate them what you think they're worth. I wouldn't worry about how often would I play this. I totally agree. There's games that I've rated 9s that I'll probably never play again. A lot of the legacy games, I played them. They were fantastic. They're the greatest things I've ever played. I'm not going to play it again. I've
Right.
done that. It's a one and done. You go even to escape room games. Would I ever play this escape room game again? No, I've
No.
played it. I remember it, but it was great.
Mm-hmm.
What I think the biggest point is I wouldn't use it as a pulpit. I wouldn't use it as a showcase. I'm angry, so I'm going to rate this game a 1, even though I kind of think it was a well-designed game. I even go further than that myself, where if I play a game and I don't like the game, but I look at it and go, man, that's really clever. They've done a really neat design, really neat mechanics. I love the balance. I understand what they're going for. I just hate playing it. I would probably rate it pretty high. I can separate my own experience and love for playing it versus how well crafted the game is. And maybe I'm overthinking the whole rating system, but to a certain extent, I'm journalist, reporter, or even reviewer. And I feel a responsibility to let others know whether I think this is a well-made game.
And with I don't rate games specifically as a publisher, and when I was a publisher, any rating that I had up there, I actually took down. I just felt it was unfair for me to start rating games, and of course, I'm biased on games I'm putting out. They're great, so I had ratings. I took them all off very early on my Stronghold Games career, and I don't rate them now. But if I was just average person gamer out there, I would do it based on how good of a game I think this is. BGG tries to help you with well, if it's a 2, if it's and they give you a little sentence. It's a 10 if it's this. But I would always say this is a 10 game because I love this game. Period. I Pandemic Legacy. That's a 10. I'll never play it again, of course, because like you said, you just don't do that, right? So it's not about I'll play this game anytime.
Yeah.
I think that's just a guideline what they're saying. A game is a 1 if it's completely broken, really. That's really what it was, or it's just crap. So that's how I do it. I don't think, again, putting so much stock in this stuff is a little rough. But as Corey said, we're human beings. We rate things. We put things in orders. This is kind of helps our mind work. And especially since we've got all these games, we want to say, oh, that's one I really want to play again and again and again. Obviously, it should be rated high. This one, I probably should just get rid of this game, etc. Corey, do you want to take this next question? This is all about your business model. Do you want to?
This is funny.
Go ahead. I think it's a good question because people would like to know it.
And it is a very logical question that I ask myself every morning. Jeremiah Brammer, at Jeremiah Brammer, how does Above Board make money? Because playing board games in exotic locations seems expensive. It is expensive. We have done really expensive, really dumb things. So I can say that the shark video, which is one of our best videos, where we played board games underwater on the deck of a sunken ship surrounded by sharks, that was in the order of about $30,000 to make that video. So yeah, it was a lot of money. We have an unusual business model in that we are selling ourselves and we are selling our studio. So we make money by renting the studio and renting our services to both the board gaming area. Some of our videos are sponsored. We get paid for that. And to Hollywood in general. We have a high-tech studio that has CGI graphics, 270-degree green screen rooms with big curved walls, called a psych, and robotic cameras, which are programmable repeated motion, live CGI on these robotic cameras. We do really cool CGI. If you watch our ongoing role-playing series that's going on right now called Dungeon Call, we've got guest stars. You can see our CGI going. You can see how we use this studio. And we will rent the studio, and that's one of our business models for how to make money. It would be wonderful, if everybody who's listening got every single human being on earth to subscribe, and then we'd make money off of YouTube as well. But YouTube is a fickle thing. You can't wake up one day and decide, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to become a tennis pro because they make a lot of money. So I'll just go ahead and become a tennis pro. It's the same sort of thing. You can't just wake up and say, I'm going to be a YouTube star because they make a lot of money. There's a lot of luck and there's a huge amount of work So it would be lovely if we made a ton of money off the YouTube side as well. But if it happens, I'm not going to cry. So those are our various business models is we use the YouTube space as much as advertising for what we do, what our services are, as we do an income stream.
And there you have it, Corey, the financial genius, because he
I
doesn't,
am not a financial
and
genius.
he doesn't
I
want
am
me as his
very
financial
skilled.
advisor.
I think you don't want to be my financial advisor
I do not.
because my skill is spending money. My skill is not making money.
Yes. There you have it. Let's get over now to play testing. All right, Corey. Last week, again, it was one of my questions,
It's a
and
terrible question.
terrible question. Of course it is, because it was
Terrible.
mine. So as I read this, why don't you go pick out some of the ones that you like the best? The question that we pose to all of you: do you review the quote Gen Con preview or quote Essen preview or any of the game preview geek lists that W. Eric Martin hosts on BGG before all the major conventions? If so, how do you use them? Do you use them to select the games you may buy? Just see what the popular games are that are being released? Just for fun to get information or other? Corey, I thought this was a genius question, especially
I
since we,
actually do really
yeah,
like the question a
okay.
lot because
Thank you.
literally the day before you told me about the question when I read the question, I was in the lists. I was deep in the lists,
Let's go.
marking off and deciding what I loved. So Paul Marchbanks, I absolutely use the lists and love them. I will use a list to just peruse through games that look interesting to research more. For conventions, I'll also use them to select games to target for purchase. This is what I do. I use the lists as a wonderful kind of targeted ad almost. I want to know what's out there. I want to know what's new. And unfortunately, most of the new exciting things I look at, I want to buy.
Very cool. So, good friend Greg Senko, he says, yes. And if I'm going to the convention, I'm religious about it. It provides me with a sense of direction as to where I want to allocate my time while at the event. Hats off to Eric Martin for the time and effort he puts into compiling those lists. He really does spend a
Oh, he is
huge
a
amount of time.
machine.
He's a machine about doing it. It's really good.
I'm already going through the Essen lists.
There you go.
Aaron Pope, this is the sort of answer I really like hearing. Aaron Pope says, "Great question for my future self. I've not yet had the opportunity to attend a con, so I haven't reviewed either list. I've learned that there's no sense in willfully giving myself up to FOMO. But next year, I have both Origins and Gen Con marked on my calendar and hope to attend them. So I'll be referencing the Gen Con list in 2025."
Hmm.
So fantastic.
So you can
This
see,
question's great just to if people hadn't heard about these.
right.
It's such an amazing resource. I'm biased, but it's such an amazing resource.
And you can see the nature of these answers are very interesting. So Greg had this like, well, yeah, if I use it religiously, especially if I'm at the convention, I mark off the stuff and right. And then Aaron's like, well, I don't go to conventions, so I'm gonna use this in the future, I think. And then now Gabriel says Gabriel Perez from the US. He says, I use them as a source of what games are coming up in the future and add them to a wish list and subscribe to them. As more information comes out, I can adjust my wish list and rankings accordingly. So it's really
I do
about,
that too.
yep.
Yeah, that the whole system on BGG where you can mark games not only as I own this, I don't own this. You mark them as a wish list and how badly you want it. I use that a lot.
Yeah.
Kirk W, friend of the channel. I always bump into Kirk at Essen.
Yep.
Often he works the Dice Tower booth. Interestingly, corset maker, and
The corset maker.
I have had the most amazing conversations with him about corsets and how corsets are made. Anyway, tangent. He wrote, "Wait, what's the question? I'm a bit distracted. There's just so many games coming up at this year's Spiel. I'm trying to get through the list, but there's just so many. I'm bookmarking this thread for later, and hopefully we'll be able to post a proper answer after the Spiel."
That's great. That
That's
is
kind
just
of how
great.
my mind works.
There you go. That's just great. So, Corey, this week's question is from you because I grabbed it out of the ones you put at the bottom. So, why don't you read this question to our audience?
So once again, I have filled in the question list because Stephen cannot be trusted to make questions.
I have the next two. They're mine.
Really? Really? I'm going to get rid of those. They're terrible.
Go ahead.
So, my question, and this is a very straightforward, just one that crossed my mind. Do you actively go out and purchase the neoprene game mats when they're available for a game? In essence, do you prefer using a neoprene game mat or a traditional cardboard? And this came up because I automatically assumed people would want to play on the neoprene when people come over to my house. But I've had a couple games recently where people were kind of poo-pooed the neoprene and they wanted the original cardboard mat. So, what do you think? Neoprene or cardboard?
So here's my thought on this. I do love playing on the neoprene mat. So I'm answering the second question first. I would prefer normally doing it. They're very easy to pick up things, right? It's like
Yeah.
when you're trying to pick up a card or something, when you push in and you grab it, it's much easier. They're very pretty as well. But the first part of the question, do you actively go out and purchase neoprene game mats when they're available for a game? And my answer there is a categorical no. And the reason is I can't stand storing the things. I have a few, I have a half a dozen or more neoprene mats for things where I started getting them. And I'm like, I don't want to store them. You have a large house with a great storage system for these. I don't have the space. I want to keep my
Yeah.
games contained
I
in a
actually
certain
use
way.
an architectural blueprint storage rack where they're rolled up and stored vertically in this honeycomb of slots.
It's genius. I mean, it really is. And then you put a little clip with a number on it on the thing. And then when you open up a game box and it has a number sitting like right on top, you say, oh, there must be an accessory for this. You go over to that and you grab the mat or whatever the accessory is that didn't
That's
fit in the box.
all.
It's a great
That's all
idea.
Barry.
And
That's all Barry.
that's your buddy Barry. It's a
Barry
great
is constantly building and organizing things at my house, and I would be completely lost without him.
That's great. This is a great question, by the way. I'm going to compliment you, though I did rephrase it significantly. Yours original question said neoprene or traditional game board. That was your question, so I added a little flavor to it. But it's a great comment question about how you feel about these things. Does it bother you that they take up so much space? Do you care? People might not care like you, and you've created a great solution to it. So we're asking all of you right now to go and answer that question over in our play testing number 333 thread, which I just put up there as we were talking. And we'll maybe take your answer to it for next week. In the meantime, the final scoring. Now that my voice is loosened up a little bit here in the morning. Thank you so much for listening, and help us spread the word about this podcast by telling your friends to download Board Games Insider wherever they like to get their podcasts, or watch Board Games Insider on the Podfather of Gaming YouTube channel. Do you want to be part of this podcast? You can go ask us questions in the strategy and tactics section in the guild, or answer our question in the play testing segment in the guild. Check out the websites: portalgamesus.com, podfathergaming.com, dicetowerdish.com, playtozgames.com, and on social media, like our pages on Facebook. They are Board Games Insider, Portal Games US, Podfather Gaming, and Play2Z Games. Speak directly to us, and Twitter and X and Instagram. Yeah, Twitter and X. Do you call it X yet? I can't do it.
You've read this exact same thing like hundreds of times, right?
Hundreds.
Like, do you want me to read this?
No, you're not allowed to. It's at Portal Games US, at Podfather Gaming, and at Dice Tower Dish. And they're very active YouTube channels are Portal Games Studio, the Podfather of Gaming, and Above Board TV. I try to change it up a little bit each time to keep me interested. And on TikTok for Ignacy, it is Portal Games US. We really would love to see you at an upcoming convention. So here at Dice Tower Retreat, it'll be over by the time you hear this. We got BGG at Sea. We have the World Series of Board Gaming. I won't be at Essen. Corey will be at Essen.
I'll be at Essen.
There you go. So that's the stuff happening in the next 2 months. So hopefully we'll see you. Please talk to us.
In Iceland. I'm going to be in Helsinki. I'm going to be in Essen. I'm going to be in Washington, D.C.
Are you taking above board with you?
Essen. Above board's going to Essen.
Jeez. Every time
So
I'm not at a convention, above board's doing something. So like you're just doing that on purpose. So I'll never be on the.
it's true. We
Yeah,
pre-plan it that way.
that's absolutely true. Board Games Insider, professionally edited by Joshua Bowman from Tabletop Submarine Podcast. If you want your podcast edited by Joshua, reach out to him at tabletopsubmarine@gmail.com. And that beautiful voice you hear doing the intro and the outro and all those segments between is that of Ray Greenlee, and he can be contacted to do voiceover work at raygreenleevoiceover.com. Corey, that brings us to the end of another amazing episode of Board Games Insider. Is there anything else you'd like to impart on our amazing listeners and watchers?
It has just been so crazy. I can't think. We've got
Yep.
our B video. The ever hyped B video is probably about a
Oh,
week away. So I'm really excited to see the final edit on that one. Yeah.
very cool. I can't wait to see what that looks like. And I'm just going to mention again, please, please go over to Kickstarter and check out Play 2Z's 23 Knives. I guarantee you will not be disappointed if you're at all into the social deduction genre. This is a very interesting and different take. 23 Knives, Kickstarter now, just the next 2 or 3
Absolutely.
days. 2-3 days, and it's over. Everybody, we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
See you later, everyone. Such a pro.